Hello and welcome to the call. During today's call, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions by typing a question in the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. The call is being recorded, and if you have any objections, to please disconnect at this time. Without further ado, Davin, you may begin.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second webinar for the long-term care staffing assistance program. First of all, I don't want to thank you for your patience because you really didn't have any choice, but I do want to sincerely apologize for the delays that we have had. They cannot be blamed on any one entity. I will tell you it's a kind of a combination of a lot of things. The Department of Health is very used to administering grants that are state grants authorized by the state legislature. Not quite as experienced with federal grants. And then speaking of federal grants, this is the first grant that we have ever done with the Department of Treasury. Most of these federal grants are usually with other branches of the federal government. I know Deloitte's used to dealing with FEMA quite a bit, but this has been a little bit of a learning curve for everyone, including the U.S. Department of Treasury, I think. And so apologies again for the delays. We really thought we would have this ready to go maybe in November, but there have just been multiple delays. So we've worked hard, Deloitte has worked hard to make sure that the interface will work properly and that the payments will be issued timely. I want to thank Deloitte for all their hard work. I want to thank THCA for their work in publicizing and their guidance in developing the grant program. And I want to thank some user testers that have volunteered and will be putting some final touches and giving us some feedback before this goes live. We will be conducting user testing in the next few days, and the portal is scheduled to open January the 20th. So that's a week from Friday. The good news is the submission deadline has been extended. It now will be open until March 31st. So after March 31st, you will not be able to submit more documentation to qualify for your grants. The good news about this grant is that you don't have to apply for it. You've already been approved. The grant amount is already set. It's based upon your joint annual report for the fiscal year, or no, the calendar year that ended in 2020, December 31, 2020. And we had a total of $50 million that we want to distribute between nursing facilities and assisted livings. And our intention is to distribute every penny of that $50 million. If we don't, the state doesn't get to keep that money. So we have no incentive not to distribute it to you. If there's money that goes unclaimed, it has to go back to the federal government. I will tell you, I know there are a lot of grants out there. I know you've seen some grants that might be, you know, $2,000 or $3,000 here, $2,000 or $3,000 there. This is a different animal altogether. This grant has an average for the assisted living facilities. The average maximum grant amount is $33,582. And for nursing facilities, the average is $119,426. So I think my point is, this is going to be a lot of work on your part. You're about to hear a whole lot of information about exactly how much work it's going to be, but I think it very much is worth your effort. And Deloitte has set up a tremendous help desk that will be able to help you. And we have some pretty good guidance here to help you be successful. And I encourage you, even though the portal doesn't open until January 20th, to take these next 10 days, if you haven't already been working on this, to get all your documentation together and organized. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to Sean at Deloitte, who's been overseeing this project on their behalf.
Thanks, Davin. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone being on the call today. Obviously, yeah, we've been working hard to do a few things over the last couple of months, and worked with Davin and the team to effectively really work as it relates to starting up this grant. And, you know, one of the type of things we've been doing, we've been getting a system developed and in place, which we've done. We're about to do some user acceptance testing here to basically handle this grant. And we feel pretty good. We've used this system across the nation. And like I said, I think you guys will enjoy getting it in. It should make it pretty easy. We've been spending a lot of time on preparing to onboard all of y'all into this grant as sub-grantees and you know, obviously build the processes in place to get these claims going and processed. Now, there are some tight deadlines that are going to come up, so you know, want everyone to know that. But however, you know, as Davin said, there's some large monies here, right? And so it's, the return on investment for you guys are pretty good by doing some of the things that we'll need to have done to get these grants in and processed. And also, as it relates to from a Deloitte standpoint, we'll spend a bunch of time working with you know, evaluating the claims, the documentations that's put into the system. And you know, once again, I think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that's why I want to make sure that the documentation is clearly understood, what's needed, which Zane will go over. And so it's easy to get through, make sure it's eligible, make sure it's documented right, and so the money can get out the door. And that's sort of what we're seeing here in the next month, couple months. I do want to raise caution here. Obviously, with federal dollars, there are a lot of strings attached in a sense. Then that's why I was getting back on the documentation, make sure things are done right, and we got to make sure things are compliant, because if not, the state's on the hook, and then, you know, the federal government can come back and claw back money. And we sort of expect that. We expect the federal government to come back and send some auditors out at some point in time. We don't know where, but I think some of these federal grants are out there. The auditors will come looking for some money back. And we've seen that on other type of grants as well. So with that said and done, Zane, I'd like to pass it back over to you to walk through some of the details.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Davin. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to speak with you here today on informational webinar number 2. If you missed our informational webinar number 1, that can be found on the state's website. So please take the opportunity to go back and take a look at informational webinar number 1. On that webinar, we really dove deeply into discussing the eligibility of what exactly is eligible for this grant and the documentation requirements. Now, we're going to touch on those 2 topics again, give you a brief overview of that. But if you know, maybe if we don't go as in depth on it in this session, take a look at the other webinar number 1, and that might catch you up on some things. The purpose of this webinar in particular is we want to, you know, like I said, we're going to touch on eligibility and ineligibility of documents. But we really want to focus on what are the next steps that are going to come your way. We want to show you how to register your facility into our portal. So we'll do a quick demonstration of that and walk through those steps. And then we'll show you how to request a reimbursement. So how do you make the claim for the funds that you need? How to fill out we have 2 mandatory documents that you need to fill out. That's going to be our claim summary template and the state's grant budget form. So we'll go over how to fill out those documents as well as show you where you upload your documentation to make sure that you have it all. And then, of course, we'll touch again on what those required documents are for if you're making a claim for your existing staff members for eligible costs incurred, and or if you're making a claim for any contracted staff that you hired. So we'll touch on that as well and give you a quick brief overview of what those documents may look like, of course, understanding that every organization's documentation is different. Now, before we keep going any further, I do want to remind everyone that we do have the Q&A function enabled for this webinar. Please, if you do have any questions that pop up, go ahead and write them down over there. We're not going to be able to answer them right here during this webinar, but for these questions, we will take a look and update our frequently asked questions with the answers to some of these questions. So if you do have something that pops up and you don't think we've addressed it, please write it down, and we'll be sure to update our FAQs. So Taking a step back, just a quick reminder to everyone, as Davin said, funding was made available to the state of Tennessee through the ARPA, American Resilience. I forget the acronym at the moment. I apologize. American Rescue Plan Act. There it is. Funding was made available to the state of Tennessee through that program in 2021. From that funding, this grant program was created, which allocates $50 million to nursing facilities and assisted care living facilities who expanded their staffing resources to treat patients through COVID-19. As Davin said, we have $50 million available. We want to be able to use and distribute all $50 million through your claims. So one thing I also want to inform everyone of, I know the Tennessee Department of Health has multiple grant programs going on right now. But this portal that we're going to talk about today and this particular grant program is separate and distinct from those programs. We cannot take claims from another grant program or answer questions about another program. So I'm sorry, you can't claim multiple grants through this one portal. If you have any questions about any of those other grant programs, please reach out to TDH. Next slide, please. Okay, a reminder to everyone of what exactly is eligible for this particular grant. So this grant is made for you to be able to claim your for your employees' hazard pay, overtime pay, and pay differentials for your existing staff. A reminder that all costs must have been incurred between the dates of March 4th of 2021 through December 31st of 2021. Any supplemental staffing agency or nursing contracts that you all incurred, those are also eligible. And any additional housing or travel costs that went for your staff or your contracted nursing or staffing agency that went above cost already covered in your staffing contract. So that's what's eligible for this program. What is ineligible for this program is any costs that were incurred outside of those specific dates of March 4th of 2021 through December 31st of 2021. Now, let me take a moment here for instances whenever, let's say you run payroll on March 5th of 2021. What we're looking for is what is eligible is the actual dates worked by your staff. That's what needs to fall into that time period of March 4th, 2021 through December 31st of 2021. So if your employees worked in February, but you ran payroll on March 5th, those costs are ineligible. But let's say you had folks incur eligible costs at the end of December of 2021 and you ran payroll, say January, say sometime in mid-January to cover those costs would be eligible. So we're looking at the actual dates worked by your employees or work performed by your contracting staff. As I mentioned, other expenses such as material costs or other costs which may be covered under other grants, those are not eligible in this particular program. And please keep in mind that no lobbying expenses, that's a federal requirement, are eligible for this program. Another thing to keep in mind for you to look at before submitting your expenses is making sure that these funds have not been covered by some other funding source. We know that there's been a lot of federal and state dollars through the Coronavirus Relief Fund or potential other state programs that may have covered some staffing costs. There's no double dipping allowed here. So if your employee here had their hazard pay covered by another grant program, you cannot claim that same time here. That is against federal rules and federal laws. All right, so now we're going to talk about registration, but a reminder, this was covered on our last webinar, but it's very important and worth a reminder to everyone. You all need to, because you're receiving federal funds, you need to have your organization registered on sam.gov. SAM.gov is a federal website. It will give you your organization a unique entity ID number. and it is required for us to disperse funding to your organization. Now, please note that if your organization has never signed up for SAM.gov before, it can take multiple weeks to get through the process. So please register as soon as possible. You may register, and as soon as you register, they may give you your unique ID number. However, we have to reach the status of active. And so there's a whole workflow that they go through on their end, and that does take time. And if your organization has registered for SAM.gov before, please make sure that your registration is active and current. It may expire over the time period of this program, so please be on top of it. Again, it is required to be in the active status for us to disperse funding. And similarly, we need your organization registered in the state's accounting platform, Edison, in order for us to be able to send you your funds. We don't want to get all the way to the very end where your organization has eligible funding and we're ready to send you a check, and we can't send you a check because your organization's not registered in Edison. So please follow the links to the portal and register your organization. Okay, so now actually talking about how to register your organization and get onto the portal. Over the next, before the end of January, as Davin said, January 20th is our target date to launch the portal. Your organization will receive an email. In this email, there is a link. Please keep this email with you. This link in the email is the only way to register your organization onto the portal. You cannot go onto the portal and find a registration link. We do this so not everyone in the public can go and just register their organization for this grant program. Your organization has already been approved, so this is a unique link for you all to register your program. A reminder to the folks on this call as well. Please make sure the person registering for this program within your organization is the person who is going to be uploading the documentation. You may be the administrator or CEO or CFO of your organization, but if you're not the person who's going to be uploading documentation, please forward this email to the appropriate person and have them register. They'll be the person that does the registration. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Eric Matson on our team, and he's going to walk you through how to upload documentation and register your organization. Eric?
Thank you, Zane. As Zane spoke about, you will be getting an email, and an email will have a link to this registration screen here. On this registration screen, you'll be asked for your first name, and then you'll be asking for your last name. Then you'll be asked for an email address. And this email address is important. Make sure it's an accessible email address, because this is where we'll be sending your username as well as initial password. So we're going to you'll need to agree to the state Tennessee privacy policy, and then you can hit submit. Upon submit, you'll be greeted with a successful message saying your account is created, and the user will be notified. Upon this, you will also be getting an email that, like I stated, will have your username as well as initial password. It will look similar to this. And it will also have a link here to where you can go and log in initially. So we will take that link and log in here. And we will also take the credentials that we were provided. Copy and pasting is fine. We will log in initially, log in successful, and now you'll be greeted with a screen that you'll have to change the temporary password. First spot, you'll put in the current temporary password that we had provided for you, And then you can put in your own password here. Now you are logged in. You are logged in when you see in the upper right hand corner your username, and there's log up functionality here as well. And we can have the menu here where we will show the program overview, as well as help and support where we display all the frequently asked questions. Okay. On home screen or in facility request, this is where you will start your request. Click in here and you will add a new facility here. We'll click on add a new facility. And this is the request starts. Okay. The first question is to declare whether you are a nursing home or assisted care living facility. If you're still, this note here is if your facility is both a nursing home and assisted care living facility, you can receive a separate grant for both, but you'll need to do 2 separate applications. Okay. So at this point, we will select nursing home, entity type. You can choose your entity type here, and then your TIN number. And now your state license number here. And you can click at this point, get facility data. At this point, when you click facility data, these will populate with your name as well as your address. We will prompt you here for your title, as well as contact phone number. When we receive the facility data and you are registered with SAM.gov, the answer will be pre-populated for you along with your unique entity identifier. If you did not have that, we will have the link here to SAM.gov for you to register. We will now also ask for a secondary contact's first name. As well as title. And contact details for the secondary. At this point, we'll hit next to go to the next section of the form. Here we have grant acknowledgement attestations. You are asked to read and check these attestations one by one. And then electronically sign to accept. Now we can move on. At this point, we generate a PDF, personalized PDF, the terms and conditions for your facility. We will see here, we'll have your facility name here, along with a pre-populated award amount, contract number, and towards the bottom, we will have your details here as well. Your name, the facility name, your title, as well as today's date. We ask you to accept and electronically sign here. And then we can move on to the next form. And this letter here is just notification for you for your acceptance into the program. There is nothing for you to do here, nothing to sign, just you can review and accept. This is the final stage of the form. So at this point, you can now submit. Okay, we will go back to the facility request page. And we will see here, now that you have the facility request, and now we can submit a request for reimbursement. We'll click on the submit request for reimbursement. And at this page, we ask you to upload your expense details. First, you can fill in the total amount requested. And we have 2 mandatory forms, the grant budget form, as well as the claim summary template. They're available throughout the application. They're also available here as well through these links, which you can absolutely click on and download the links there as well. Okay. Once you have finished completing them, we just ask you to upload the documents. You can add one document here. As well as the claim summary template. And as I stated, these are the only two mandatory forms, but there are also different areas where for you to upload other documents as well, including timesheets, procurement policies, and other documentation and invoices. At this point, you can hit submit. We can come back home to see the facility request, and you can see now that you have the facility as well as an expense request. This concludes the demonstration of the request for reimbursement.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate the walkthrough on that. If you please make sure that you guys watch through the webinar if you didn't follow that. That's a great step-by-step walkthrough. The slides that we will be sending out to you all at the end, they're not as great as that walkthrough, but they will also be able to help you set up. So now that we've gone through that, the next thing that we're going to touch on is the required documents that we're going to be looking at. So for your required documents, I'll wait for Connor to show the page here. Again, the required documents, the way to really think about them here is for your existing staff. Remember, this is your hazard pay, overtime pay, or pay differentials. There are a certain set of requirements or documentation requirements for those claims. And if you have your staffing agency claims or any of your travel expense claims, those have a different set of documentation requirements. So we'll go over them generally, but really what we want to focus this time on is we're going to go over the claim summary template that Eric had mentioned and the grant budget form, those two required documents that you will need to fill out and upload for every claim. And we'll show you how to fill those out and give you some instructions on those. So next slide, please. So a quick reminder here on what is required for your existing staff. It is going to be that claim summary template, a grant budget form, and we'll discuss the rest of these documents here in a moment. But for this moment, Connor, I'd like to ask you to show us how to fill out the claim summary template.
Can do. All right. So morning, everybody. I'm going to give y'all a quick run through on how to fill out your claim summary template. So as you see at the bottom, we have 4 tabs. We're starting here at the cover. So this is essentially your encyclopedia. This is where if you have any questions about how to fill out this document, or if you have any questions about some of the terminology we're using, you can find those answers here, as well as some other resources. We hope this should be simple enough, but if there are any explanations needed, you can come here. Next is the claim summary. We'll return here a little later, but this is going to be the summation of all the information from the following 2 slides. Here's where you start to fill things out. So here we have the staff differential summary. So this is your personal staff, people who are hired by your company, not contractors. So we're going to start with the employee name. So the Doe family is well represented here, Jeff Doe. Now, there are other options, of course, for staff you can claim, but I've decided to go with CNA here, CNA registered nurse, but there are other options, of course, you can choose. Choose whether or not your employee is hourly or salary. We're going to go hourly here. So this is week beginning and week ending. Notice, so there are a lot of options here. Make sure you claim each individual week. So if Jeff here is working 10 weeks, we're going to need 10 separate entries for Jeff. So I'm going to start week 322 and we're going to go to 328 because that's the end of that week. NA for base salary, since he is not salaried. And then regular or ineligible hours. So this is the number of hours that Jeff's going to work regardless of the week. He's not getting overtime. He's not getting any differential pay, etc. So we're going to go 40. That seems standard. 25. Now you will notice that these are going to auto-populate based on the responses you provide. So 40 and 25, that's 1,000. Does that for you. Hazard pay or COVID-19 differential hours. So of course, based on your hazard pay policy or any differentials somebody worked that they otherwise wouldn't have worked, especially specifically due to COVID-19. So let's say 5 hours at $20. So again, auto populates, you get $100. Overtime hours, again, relatively straightforward. The number of hours they worked over their, whatever their standard maximum or their standard number of hours in a week is. So again, we'll do 5 by 20. And once again, we get 100. This is your overtime fringe percentage. So the benefits they get that are not exactly like directly monetary. So, you know, healthcare, et cetera. Whatever the percentage is for each individual employee, we're going to put that here. We'll say 10% just to make it simple. And then finally, the last thing you need to fill in is the total employee pay. Pretty simple. Eligible plus ineligible equals total employee pay. 1,000 plus, okay, 1210. Next, check number. So the total amount, or the unique identifier on each individual check they received. So again, if you have 10 weeks, we're going to need 10 of these check numbers. So we'll say 234. And then once again, just, you know, if you would like to comment about, you know, who they are or what they do. Pretty straightforward. Next, we're going to do contract summary. So once again, relatively simple. Here, we're going to start with the vendor. So the person from whom you were receiving the services. So state of Tennessee, Department of Health. Your contract ID, so the unique identifier for the individual contract for which you are requesting reimbursement. So 2345-6. So a quick description of the work performed. So as you see above, there's, you know, supplemental staffing for CNAs or 3 months housing, whatever the individual need may be. We don't need in-depth analysis. You know, they provided 15 CNAs who did radiological work and whatever else. We don't need that. We just need, you know, very basic stuff. So 10 CNAs, 5 RNs. Invoice number. So the invoice that you received for the work, you know, provided to you. So C-2002. Now, same as before. This you don't need every individual week. This is just the link to the contract that you signed on to. So, or rather the eligible period. If there's time before this start date, of course you won't include that, but starting at, let's say, I don't know, 3/15 going to 4/25, week and 10 days, or a month and 10 days. And then the invoice date. So when you actually received the invoice for the work you received, or the work they did for you. Let's say, geez Louise, 5/2. Invoice amount, so the total amount that they are requesting you pay them for the total of the services they provided you. Let's say 10,000. And then the amount you're actually requesting from us. So the total amount of the eligible services you received based on, you know, what's allowable in this program. So let's say 10,000 again. Once again, we need the unique identifier for the proof of payment. So the check number you actually sent to pay these expenses. So check number 23456. And then finally, simple drop down. This is, we don't need you to write anything out here. This is whether or not it was for supplemental staffing or for housing and travel costs. So, as I said, we'll go back to claim summary. As you see here, the summation of all the other costs requested is now to be found here. So, you know, $100 or $210 for this third tab, $10,000 for the fourth tab, and that is $10,210. So that is how you will fill out this document. Like I said, it all should auto-populate for you once you've filled out the data, and yeah, that's about it.
Thank you very much, Connor. Appreciate it. Some important parts I'm just going to highlight again, as Connor mentioned, but just to reinforce it. For each employee, especially for your own employees, please make sure that we are doing it per pay period for each employee. We can't just have, you know, employee X, don't give us their total amount over a 10-week period. We do need it broken down per pay period on how much they got. And hopefully the supporting documentation you provide for us then is their actual, how much their wages or their pay stubs for each of those weeks. So that way we can verify for each of those weeks. So it may include multiple lines of the same employee. And also, as Connor was mentioning, as far as the check number, that does include ACH number. So if you are paying your employees with direct deposit, whatever unique identifier line item we can use to trace and verify that you paid that employee for what amount through your bank records, whatever that unique number is, please include that number at that in that line. So not necessarily just check number, but check number is an example. Okay, so that goes over the claim summary form. The second mandatory document that we need everyone to fill out is the grant budget form. Now, the grant budget form is going to look something like this. And what we will need you to do is, and I will highly recommend that everyone do the claim summary template first. The claim summary template will break out for you're doing your in-depth dive of your employees and your time at that point. This document is more of a high-level summary for us that we need to collect. And so any of your overtime expenses that are incurred, overtime, hazard pay, pay differential, you're going to include in this first line. We only need it here in under grant contract. You don't need to fill out columns 2 or 3 over here, just this first line. And just give us the total amount of your employee salary. So that's going to be your pay differential, hazard pay, overtime pay. Put that total number here. If you are claiming any overtime fringe benefits rate, so fringe benefits that will be eligible for this program only will apply to overtime. You're not going to have hazard fringe or pay differential fringe. Those aren't going to happen. So any fringe benefits rate that you are claiming, those do need to be separated out, and they will need to be included over here. Again, if you've completed your claim summary template, that may require a little bit of math on your part to pull it out, but it should be done and should be included here. For any staffing agency costs that you are incurring through contractors, please include that total amount here under the professional fee grant and award line, because that is a professional fee for your contractors. If you have hotel costs or travel costs that you're claiming for your employees, please include that total amount here under travel, conferences, meetings, because that is travel. So that's where that will go. You do not need to worry about the second page. Don't worry about filling out anything that's listed down here on the second page. We don't need that level of detail. We just need a breakout of what's being claimed to be included on this sheet here. So that should be your grant budget form. Pretty straightforward. Again, do your claim summary template form first, and it'll be pretty easy to tie your numbers together at that point. Okay, Connor, you can go back to the slide. So as a reminder, in webinar number 1, we really dove pretty deeply into these required documents. We'll touch on some of the stuff over here as well, just as a reminder. So again, for your existing staff, we also call it force account labor staff, you'll need your claim summary template, your grant budget form, your relevant payroll policy. So whatever policy you had in effect at the time of your claim. So whatever payroll policy was in effect in March of 2021 through December of 2021, please include that payroll policy and have the applicable hazard pay policy, overtime policy, or pay differential policy included there. We will need copies for each employee that you're claiming. We'll need their approved or verified time for each claimed employee for each day claimed. So what that means to us is we just want to make sure that if you're saying someone worked on March 5th, 2021, we want to make sure that they were at work. So if you have timesheets, great, please submit signed or approved timesheets. If you don't have timesheets and you say you keep track of something like through Kronos or some other application, maybe provide us with their sick leave or their vacation leave, just to show what days they were not working. That way we can assume that the days that are not marked are days that they did work a typical day. We need something just to verify that they were working, in fact, on the days claimed. We'll need payroll documentation, which details the particular claimed employee's wages and benefits. So we need to know how much regular pay they received, how much fringe that they received. That can come in the form of pay stubs, payroll registers, which show the employees' names. Again, we're trying to limit personal information as much as possible. So if there's a way that you can redact Social Security information or unnecessary information, if you have a whole list of payroll registers for all these employees and you're only claiming 3 out of, say, 15 employees, let's try to redact those other employees if you have the time and ability to. We're really trying to limit, looking at people that are not being claimed here. And then again, proof of payment. We do need to verify that your organization actually did incur the cost that you're claiming here. So that can come in various forms. If you do, most organizations do have direct deposit, ACH payments. If you did that, then maybe we'll need a bank statement which shows funds coming into your organization's bank account and then those funds leaving your organization's bank account, and an accompanying payroll register showing, your employee's ID and that those funds went to that particular employee. If your organization still pays in checks, then we would want either the front and back of a check, which shows third-party verification of processing, or just the front of the check with a corresponding bank statement from your organization, which shows that the check was cashed. So of those documents we just showed, here's just a quick visual representation of what those documents may look like, understanding that each organization's documents are going to look different, but this is just a quick demonstration. So we do need your claim summary template. As Eric mentioned, the claim summary template and the grant budget form can both be found throughout our portal. It's in multiple places. It's on the application itself. So you should be able to run across these documents fairly simply and download them and fill them out. And we need them for every single claim that is that you'll be doing. So there's your grant budget form. Again, just fill out the stuff on the left, the stuff on the right. You can ignore the second page. This is an example of a timesheet in case, I don't know if in case your organization doesn't really look at timesheets often. If you have timesheets, great, please make sure that they're signed. If you don't have timesheets, again, please find us some way to show that or prove that that employee was working on the day claimed. A copy of a pay stub, bank statements, again redacted for information that we don't need. We want to show fund, if you're doing ACH, funds coming in, funds going out, and the payroll register for your particular employee. For your personnel policy, just a reminder, we do need to have the documentation which shows what your organization's policy was for hazard pay, pay differential, or overtime pay that's being claimed. Hopefully this includes some kind of documentation or explanation of what their base pay is by position, and then an explanation of how you calculate hazard pay, overtime, or pay differential shifts from normal pay rates. All right, next is for your staffing agency cost, and this also does apply to your hotel costs. Obviously, for hotels, not everything here is going to be applicable, but it just might. There might be some parts here that are applicable to hotel expenses, but this is going to apply for mostly contractor costs over here. Again, we're looking at for a claim summary template and a grant budget form. Instead of a personnel policy, we need your purchasing policy, because your organization did purchase services. We need a copy of the fully executed contract with the claimed vendor. That contract should include your rate sheet, any amendments to your contract, or applicable task orders. We'll talk about procurement documentation because that is a federal requirement for us to have some kind of procurement documentation for contracts. And then whenever we receive your invoices, we do need a full detailed invoice rather than just a one pager that says $15,000. We do need a full invoice that details how your vendor reached the amount that they're invoicing you. And then just like before, we'll need proof of payment. So claim summary form, grant budget form. For your invoices, again, we do need the detailed invoice that you had. It should be accompanied by pages, breaking it down by each contractor, how many hours they worked, so that way we can tie it together to get to the overall contract amount. If you don't have it, please reach out to your vendor. They should be able to provide that to you. Bank statement or proof of payment. In this case, if you wrote a check, kind of the same idea, check number. If you have the processed check, we'll want the front and back of the check showing that the bank validated it, or the front of the check and then your bank statement showing that the check was cashed. If you have internal ledgers that you used, we'll want to see the internal ledger showing that it was cashed. If your check went to the vendor but covered maybe more than one invoice, we do need a check breakdown to show which invoice numbers were covered by which particular check. So that was your check detail. Your purchasing policy is going to be necessary for this because, again, you are purchasing services rather than materials in this case. So we will need to see a copy of your organization's purchasing policy to understand what your particular organization's rules are for procuring services. Now that's important because, next slide, please. That's important for procurement documentation. Now there is an order of how we follow procurement documentation. First thing we're going to look at is your organization's own rules from your purchasing policy. Did you follow your own rules? If you did, great. We'll just make sure that you followed them. If you didn't, we'll go down here to step 3, or maybe your organization doesn't have a procurement policy. Maybe you all don't have one at this time. If you don't have a procurement policy, then we have to follow the federal rules of procurement. The federal rules of procurement tell us we have to look at the total amount of your contract, not your particular invoice, how much your total contract is. If the services you procured were less than $10,000, those are what's called a micro purchase. Less than $10,000, we don't need any procurement documentation. We're fine. If your contract is between $10,001 and $250,000, you'll need to have obtained at least 3 quotes. And so we'll need to see a copy of the quotes or an email with the quotes, something that shows that you went out and got prices from at least 3 different vendors. If your contract was worth more than $250,000 and we're following the federal rules, then you needed to have gone out for a full procurement. What that means is you needed to have issued a request for services, solicited, sent out the solicitation, received the responses from different vendors, had some kind of scoring system in place. We'll need to see the responses that were returned to determine that kind of procurement. All right, now let's assume that you don't have a procurement policy, or you didn't follow your own procurement policy rules, and you didn't follow the federal rules if you needed to. Well, then what do? At that point, you need to write us a letter on, or a memo on your organization's letterhead, which explains that this was an emergency or exigency circumstance. And those words are important because it's part of the exception to the rule, to the federal requirements. You'll want to write that memo on your letterhead saying that this was an emergency and exigency circumstance. And you'll want to explain to us what your organization, the situation faced by your organization, why you couldn't go out for a bid for those services, and what steps you all took to procure those services at a fair and reasonable rate. So that's our fallback in case we didn't follow our own internal rules, or we didn't have internal rules, and we didn't follow the federal rules. Again, if that's over $10,000 for your services. We'll also need a copy of your fully executed contract with your vendor. Again, that needs to include a fully signed executed copy, not just signed by one party. Your copy of the contract needs to have any and all amendments. It'll need to have the terms of payment, a rate sheet that was included to understand how you were paying your contractor. And yeah, just a full copy of the contract. All right, so we've touched on all these things. Please, we're coming to the end here. If you do have any additional questions that we may not have answered at this time, please write them down in the Q&A portion of the chat. We're going to take a look at them and update our FAQs. If you have questions as you are filling out your documentation, our email address here for this program is located on the screen. If you need access to the website after you've registered, there's the link to that portal site can be found here as well by following this. We will send out these slides later today or early tomorrow, and they'll be posted on the TDH website as well. And just a reminder quickly to everyone about our upcoming timeline. I know Davin mentioned it off the top, but I'll reiterate over here. You can expect the email with the registration for into the portal to come out before the end of January. Again, the target is January 20th for that. So keep an eye out for that email. Please make sure the person that registers is the person who will be uploading documentation, not necessarily your CFO or CEO, because that's the person who has the ability to upload and fill out this documentation. The portal will be live and active until March 31st of 2023. So that's your deadline to submit your claims from the time the portal opens and you register until March 31st of 2023. So please make sure you get your information in by that time. And Davin, I'll pass it back to you for closing remarks.
Hey, Davin, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in real quick. Zane, a few questions I think that came up in the Q&A. I think we want to answer live. So I want to read them off to you, and let's just answer because some of them are a little harder to answer in the chat window. One I believe you've already answered, but I want to ask it anyway. Was posed as, can we enter a 2-week pay period on a single line since we process payroll bi-weekly instead of weekly? I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. You just have to hook it in both. Can you confirm that?
Confirm, yeah. You can just make sure that the start of your week and you have the proper start and end of your week on the spreadsheet listed over there. And if those dates don't exactly match up to what you have, let's get as close as possible. And okay. Then when we do our review, we'll take a look.
All right, thank you. I'm going to move on to the next one, and it's come up in various different forms, but and the entity has one tax ID number, but runs 4 different communities with different addresses and licenses. Would the company do one SAMS registration for the entire company, or register each location/license for an individual SAMS registration number?
So you do one SAM.gov registration for all of your entities. So that same SAM.gov number can be used across multiple facilities. But whenever you come for your facilities, you'll need to register each facility because each facility has its own grant. Does that make sense? You'll enter your organization once for a SAM.gov ID because that's a unique entity ID that's handed out by the government. But then through our portal, each of your facilities has its own grant rather than your one organization. So one organization may have 3, 4, 5, 6 different properties, as you mentioned, that you're running. You'll want to enter, and we do it based off of your license number in the state. So that's how you'll do it. As Eric showed us how to register your facility, you'll have the ability to register multiple facilities under the same login as well. So it's not like you need a whole new registration for each. You can have your person log in and register multiple facilities.
Okay, thank you. Two more I think here. If an entity received funds from an employee retention credit, would the entity be excluded from the Tennessee Nursing Facility Assisted Care Living Facility Grant Program reimbursement of overtime for critical staff?
No, you will not be excluded we've looked at that. That does not appear to be a duplication of benefits. The overtime, hazard pay, and staffing differential times are all different types of overtimes that are unbudgeted costs, which are covered by the American Rescue Plan Act and the U.S. Department of Treasury. So your tax credit that you received is not a duplication of benefits.
Okay, got a question about max dollar amount when completing out the form. Do we limit to the max amount, or do we want the entire expense population for the entire period, or do we limit it to the dollar amount that they were given?
Great question. I would go ahead and include as much eligible cost as possible in your claim, even if it exceeds your max grant amount. And the reason for that is, let's say we're reviewing some of your claims and we find some of your costs ineligible. Well, let's say you still have enough eligible costs that cover your entire max amount. Well, we're going to go ahead and give you your entire max at that point, because those are eligible costs, even if you have some ineligible costs that you may have claimed. There's also the possibility later on that some funding, if not all dollars are claimed, we may have some additional dollars reallocated. No promises on that, on how that's going to go, but go ahead and claim more than you're allocated for. We can only reimburse you up to the max anyway. So we'll stop our review once we hit that max number. But it's possible we could come back and reevaluate.
Okay, and last thing, last question, all of the nursing facilities that will be receiving funds in this program are owned by the same parent entity. Is it allowable, therefore, to share funds between facilities?
So here's what we'll say. We have a max amount on the grant per facility. So you have to claim the costs that were incurred at that facility, and that's what we're looking at. So once you receive your money for reimbursement back to the parent company, you've just been reimbursed. We don't know what you're doing at that point. The only main thing is you can't use your money for lobbying expenses. Other than that, I don't know what you're doing with your funds. You're a business, you know what's best for your organization. But what I can say is, if you have facility A and facility B, and let's say you have a full claim at facility A, but you don't have enough cost that you're claiming at facility B, you cannot claim facility A costs at facility B to make up the difference. So whatever costs were incurred at facility A need to be claimed in facility A. Whatever costs were incurred at facility B, you claim them there. And if unfortunately you have an underrun at one and overrun at another, that we can't do anything about that.
Okay, thank you. And that concludes the Q&As. Davin, to you.
Thank you, Joe. Sean did a really good job of letting y'all know about the possibility of a federal clawback, or they're taking money back. And he has not been as stern as some of the other people I've heard talk in other grants that have really scared the heebie-jeebies out of folks about that possibility. One of the big reasons, and we talked about this in our first webinar, that this project has been delayed is we, meaning the Department of Health and Deloitte, are doing everything in our power to make sure that we are doing this right from the beginning, and that we are requiring all of the proper documentation from you before we send you any money. And that way, when, not if, but when auditors come to look at this, and it may be, that may not happen for several years, but when they do, hopefully we will be able to satisfy them here at the Department of Health by showing them all the steps that we took and all the documentation that we have, that Deloitte collects through the portal and then shares with us at the end of this project. This is what we have. This is what the facilities had to submit in order to claim their dollars. And hopefully they will not show up on your door with auditors. Now, that goes for Department of Treasury auditors. It also goes for Tennessee Department of Health auditors. And it also goes for auditors from the Comptroller of the Treasury. So all of this we're doing to protect you in the long run. We certainly don't want to have any of this money going back, because again, that's money that's not spent here in Tennessee, and it's not spent caring for the people that you care for. So thank you for that. Also, if your question did not get answered, please submit it to the email address that Zane mentioned a while ago. We all have access to that. We sometimes get together and pool our information and make sure that we're singing with one voice and giving the right information to everybody. And we will get those out. Not only will we update the FAQs, but we will try to respond to your specific question in the email directly. Any other questions that you have, send them to that email. Be sure you list the name of your facility and a phone number. Sometimes the name that you have for your facility does not match the name that we have from the licensure folks, and I don't know who you might be. So give me a phone number just in case I have to call so that we can figure out which facility we're talking about and give you the proper answer. With that, I will thank everyone for attending and participating in this webinar. And I hope you will have a good rest of your day, and stay tuned for those emails. They will come out on or around the 20th of January with information as to how you can register for the portal. I know Joe has said by the end of January, and we're hoping to overachieve on that a little bit. So thank you, and have a good rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.